Hi, I'm Renel Chesak, and I'm going to go over the Hw2 changes for the network2 file. First, we'll go over the costs. Here's quadratic cost. Also, I wanted to mention that wherever there are relevant changes, I have added this comment so you can search for it and find them easily. Here's cross entropy. For the derivative, we have an issue with dividing by 0, so we just add a really small value so that it's not quite dividing by 0, but almost, so that we still get an answer instead of a null value. Here's log likelihood. We had a problem with negative infinity being included in the vector, so we just changed that to 0. And for the derivative, it was positive infinity, so we changed that to 0. Here is sigmoid, and the derivative, tan h, and the derivative, relu. We initialize a vector of zeros to compare with the z vector, and then choose whichever is maximum. Then with the derivative, we're using list comprehension, and then reshaping in order to make sure it's the right shape for the computations we'll do. Then softmax. We had issues with null values, so we use this function. Okay, and then in the initialization of the object, I added a parameter for masks if you wanted to add your own. So also, if we have an issue where the activation output function is tan h and the cost function is not quadratic cost, we override the output's activation function to sigmoid. And then also I added a variable for p, since it's more relevant than the actual dropout percent. And I added a container variable for masks, which is initialized to none. And these changes were all added to the set parameters as well. So here we are in feed forward. And I just separated this out so that we can use the activation function for the output layers on the output layer. Whereas previously we were just using the hidden layers activation function on everything. Here's the SGD function. And the main change we made was to add an if statement to check for a dropout. So this is inside the mini batch loop so that we make a different mask that will be used across each mini batch. And this is the function to make the masks. And notice that we're scaling by p here. So here's update mini batch. Added some if statements for regularization. Here's the weight update rule for L1, and here's the update rule for L2, and then otherwise, just normal weight update rule. Then in backpropagation, I added an if statement to check for masks. If there are masks, we want to make sure we iterate over them as well as the weights and biases. That way we can multiply by the mask. And we also reshape it so that we get the element-wise multiplication we desire. And if there are no masks, then you just do the ordinary computations. Then I also separated out the output layer so we can use the output activation function on it. And that's why also this loop goes to -1. It stops before -1. That way we don't go over the output layer in this loop. So here's the backward pass. No changes there. Next, inside of total cost, added an if statement for regularization. If so, we add an extra penalty for large weights, and here's the rule for L1, and this is the rule for L2. And that should be all the changes.